I'm Michael Zasloff, and I'm the inventor of Illume. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the science that underlies this product and this whole product system. First, we're going to focus on skin. Skin is a barrier, physical barrier, that has evolved to keep us literally from drying out. Its fundamental purpose is to prevent the loss of moisture. So amphibians will dry out literally in the sun. If they're not adequately hydrated, we will not. And it is entirely a function of the fact that we've got skin. And skin is made up of protein. So we are organisms that are covered by a layer of skin, which is made up of protein. Now, it turns out that as far as bacteria are concerned, microbes, which surround us in the environment in which we live, our skin is no different to them than a hamburger would be to us. It's protein, it's food. And when a microbe comes in contact with us, it doesn't really care who we are. It just sees us as a potential food source. And as a consequence, we have to protect that skin surface. All animals have to protect their skin surfaces, the surfaces of their body that are in contact with microbes. So from the very beginning of evolution, from the time that animals emerged from that primordial swamp, they had to have defenses that protected them from the organisms that would otherwise eat them. And that evolutionary invention is what Illume, in fact, everything that we've created, is meant to preserve. Now, our skin, to deal with this problem of microbes surrounding us, produces a family of defensive substances which are called antimicrobial peptides, proteins, and lipids. Antimicrobial because they fight, deal with the microbes that would otherwise consume us. And they're made by the skin cells themselves. They're made in the hair follicles. They're made in the glands that are present in our skin that secrete sweat, perspiration, and the glands that produce oil. And these structures coat the skin with substances of the sort that I've just described. In addition, we have to focus a little bit on the biology of skin. Skin is generated, our skin is a multi-layered structure that sort of looks like a brick wall, but it's very different than a brick wall. Skin is built up is created from a layer of stem cells. So we have stem cells, believe it or not, surrounding our body. They're skin stem cells. And every few hours, literally, one of these guys divides. And what happens after it divides is, first, it replaces itself. So if you're looking down this, you'll see a skin cell. The skin cell is going to divide. And this guy, this one, is now going to begin to change. So it's replaced itself in that bottom layer, but it's now going to begin a process whereby it marches up and eventually will come to the surface. And as time advances, this guy is going to ultimately be replaced by another guy below it, Okay, this is all continuing.
This is below the dermis then?
This is below. This is the lowest layer of the epidermis.
Okay.
All right, and he's going to move up. All right, and then another cell will replace him, and this guy is then going to be basically forced up. If you can picture this whole process, and this is of course going to be occurring across the entire surface of the skin. All right, so you can picture this wave of cell advancing up.
Keep doing this over.
Keeps doing it continuously.
Okay. All the way up to the
It keeps
dermis.
going, and then eventually these cells will reach the top and be sloughed off. But as they advance, they start to change, and they change character, and eventually they die. So the very top layers of cells are dead. But if you examine what's happening at a much more microscopic level, and you focus on the issues that I was describing a moment ago about the fact that our skin prevents the loss of water and prevents us from being consumed by microbes, what you discover is that these cells, as they begin to mature, begin to secrete, release, a mortar. A mortar, so to speak, if you imagine these cells to resemble bricks, the cells at the sort of lower base, at the more bottom portion of this wall, begin to secrete a combination of a mixture of antimicrobial substances and water barrier lipids as a mortar. And that mortar begins to fill in the spaces between these cells.
That's what protects the hair.
That protects the skin itself, and that is what keeps the skin from drying out. That water barrier, that mortar, that waterproofing mortar, but it also contains these antimicrobial agents. Okay, so what I'm saying is that two very important components are produced by the skin at all time. Just the skin, not the hair follicles or the sweat glands or the oil glands. The hair itself the skin itself is built up from individual skin cells which are now sort of cemented in place by this mortar, which contains waterproofing lipids and antimicrobial agents. All right? So in a normal, healthy skin, water loss is reduced, right? And if an organism decides that it wants to bury itself in and dig in as if it were a gopher, which is what an organism, microbe does. It doesn't just sit around happily. It has the capacity to just dig in, digest everything beneath it. It can't. Okay. Now, the sweat glands, the hair follicles, those structures that produce hair, and the oil glands, if you were to look at them microscopically, are deep wells in the skin. This is the skin. They go beneath the skin. Let me just draw that here. They go beneath the skin. Okay, they're like that. And right over here is dermis. All right. Okay, so they're over here. And this is the skin, all right, and then this is the underlying tissue, which we call dermis, okay. But this well is a nice, warm, wet place. A hair, if this is a hair follicle, you have a hair shaft rising from it. If it's a sweat gland, you simply have moisture leaving. But this is a nice warm incubator. So you might imagine that microbes that are sitting that are present in the environment might want to sort of just wander down and make this a home. And frankly, it is amazing that this doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen, and these structures can even exist on us, is because all along the walls of this, the hair follicles and the sweat glands are releasing these antimicrobial agents, all right, which are produced and, in a sense, protect this structure. In addition, in the case of a hair follicle, which is now being produced from is a structure that produces a very specialized form of skin, so to speak. Hair is the hair structure is being formed, and it's being formed in a process that's actually very similar to what I described over here, but instead of cells that are forming flat plates, you actually have cells that are forming long, thin structures of the same material that our skin is made of, absolutely the same proteins. The only difference is the physical configuration of that structure. Instead of it being a sheet, these are organized as a sort of thin column with plates, or the cuticles, being deposited from the walls. So there's a whole structure and story about the skin, the hair, but it's fundamentally very similar to this. Along the walls of this hair follicle are glands and structures that secrete these antimicrobial agents and proteins. Okay, so the bottom line is that the skin, as well as the hair itself, hair shaft itself, is covered with, contains within it protective substances that keep water from being lost and prevent the proteins from being digested by bacteria and other microbes in the environment. So many, many years ago, once I and others realized that that skin created this collection of chemicals, it became obvious to us that there were diseases in which we failed to produce this. And this occurs actually in diseases like eczema. It turns out that in eczema, for reasons we don't fully understand, the allergic condition leads to a failure of producing water, the water barrier substances, as well as the substances that protect the skin from being consumed by microbes. And this is part of the whole inflammatory process. So to deal with that, we attempted to create a formulation, a skin cleanser, that would both restore the barrier, permit us to clean skin, but at the same time not remove what we would regard as the good stuff. In addition, we learned years ago that it was possible for us to actually stimulate the skin to produce more of this good stuff. So this discovery, or this realization, required the finding of a whole new cleansing system. And one of the key elements in that is something that we now, at least in the Illume line, call XO70. It involves a particular surfactant, which is a very mild detergent, mild cleansing substance, that is not, doesn't really have the property, the capacity to wash away or dissolve these substances, but in addition has the particular advantage of providing some additional barrier protection to the skin. Okay, but the bottom line is that it does not disturb the fundamental barrier properties and does not remove the antimicrobial agents that we regard as important. That's right. So let me just erase
That's
this.
why it can't remove color.
Well, it can't remove color for yet another reason. It can't remove color, but I'll go to the hair. Let me go back to the hair. So if you were to look at the hair now, a hair shaft, as the hair shaft is moving up from its base where it's being generated, it is covered as it's again moving up and growing it is being covered from the sort of its lower region, its area, its younger, the younger portion, its younger, it's from its origin, or it's really from its, as it's being covered from the place where it is being created, the hair shaft is coated with and permeated by these substances, okay? And the traditional shampoos, we realized, and the traditional cleansing agents were sufficiently strong and sufficiently disruptive that they did a few things to the hair that we regarded as damaging. One of them was to remove the antimicrobial agents that were deposited on the surface. They also, as a consequence of that, took away this sort of waterproofing. And after taking the waterproofing away, the detergents themselves, sodium lauryl sulfate, sodium dodecyl sulfate, sodium sulfosuccinate, sodium sarcosinate, could permeate the hair and remove even more deeply deposited agents. But in addition, they are denaturants. These detergents have the capacity to actually distort the very structure of hair. Okay, so after a washing with these detergents, the scalp was completely cleared of what we regarded as protective substances. Scalp now lost its water barrier. It lost its coating of antimicrobial agents, antifungal agents, and so on. The hair was now stripped of this stuff. Water could permeate easily. Hair can dry out as a consequence. In addition, you've taken away the antimicrobial defenses that hair was supposed to have. You also coat the hair, and this is sort of the annoying part of this whole thing, and the sort of strange part. You coat the hair with these detergents. They turn out, these negatively charged detergents that are in almost all of our shampoos, turn out to be very sticky, and just the way they are, and they stick like heck to hair. And as a consequence of the fact that they're strongly negatively charged, they cause hair to repel one another. So you can picture you have a hair shaft that's now completely covered with this sort of like negative charge. And if you've ever walked on a rug, sometimes your hair goes like that. That's because the hairs are now, through static electricity, covered with negative charge. So this is what happens with shampoo. To deal with that, so what have we done? Let me summarize. You take a typical shampoo, you wash your hair, you've eliminated from your scalp and the hair itself waterproofing oils and antimicrobial agents that protect from microbial consumption, and you've coated the hair with a strong negatively charged detergent. To help manage the hair, you then have to add a conditioner, and the conditioners that are added all have positively charged components that are called quartz. And what they do is they just neutralize the positive charge. So the hairs that were now flying apart from one another can now come closer, and you can sort of manage your hair. The problem is that this positive and negative combination leaves a film, and it's a dulling film. So to deal with that, almost every one of the conditioners adds a silicone, and the silicone is essentially the same stuff you would use, as we've said before, to polish your car, to polish a refrigerator door. I think, many in the medical profession think that this is these are bad. These are not supposed to be on your hair and not supposed to be on your skin, frankly. But they are included to restore shine. So, to deal with this issue, and this was some years ago, introduced and began to explore the value of Exo 70, which is a combination of two non-ionic surfactants, very gentle and non-ionic. And the non-ionic part is very important, and I don't stress it all the time, but it's extremely important. So, and I'll explain why. So that if we go back to that hair shaft again, or the skin. So let's go back to the skin, and now we'll have we'll put a hair in there. Okay, the hair up there, and the so as the hair is growing, glands, structures are depositing, these cells are depositing antimicrobial agents and waterproofing agents in and on the surface of the hair, and it's now been covered, okay? The skin itself as well, it's follicle, the scalp, facial skin, your body, and so on, is also protected in a similar fashion. Okay. Dirt accumulates. That's what dirt is. It's microparticles of dust and other materials that you'd want to wash off. The Exo 70 surfactant system just does that. Takes that off, and we put a little bit more of a coating on of the antimicrobial film on the hair. It takes off these sort of particles, but does not remove this overall coating to any extent. In addition, it does not leave, if we can just if I can draw them perhaps this way, it doesn't leave itself, doesn't deposit itself on the hair. If it did, it still would not create a negative charge to any extent. So appreciate that. Now, hair itself, this coating, as the hair gets older and grows longer, begins to degrade a little bit. All right? And it turns out that the hair protein itself has a negative charge. All right? So we're talking a little bit about some science here, but hair itself has a net negative charge. That's the way hair is. It's just the nature of this protein. So there are some negative charges, and they tend to be scattered on each hair shaft sort of randomly. And they're just scattered along. They're normal. They're part of the normal structure of hair. Because we have not coated the hair with any additional detergent, we can focus our product on, in a sense, on these negative charges. These are areas where some of that protective coating has been removed, and those negative charges are now exposed to the environment. And what we've done is included in the Illume system a small amount of a conditioning agent. So in our shampoo, we've put a small amount of the conditioning agent in, just a little bit, tiny little bit. We have a lot more in the conditioning components. In fact, we don't even need them in the shampoo in principle. In fact, we can forget about them for a moment in the shampoo. The key is really what's in the conditioner. So the conditioner that we include is chemically it's a lipid that looks a lot like the lipids the normal lipids in your skin. It's one of the well-known conditioners. It has a positive charge. All right, so we picked out of the universe of the known conditioners one of them that looks a lot like the normal oil lipids that are produced in the hair, and has a positive charge. Okay, and what this molecule will do is it will be attracted. It is attracted to the negative charges that are exposed on the hair shaft. So what happens is this conditioner molecule, when we expose the washed hair to it, will bind to, find these areas, and neutralize them. This restores, if you will, the oil layer. It's
anti-aging of.
It's in a sense, it's sort of like anti-aging. But what's happened is that this normal oily barrier has now been replaced by this artificial barrier, very similar in structure, but we've only added as much as the hair needed. Okay, that's the key here. So if we look at another hair shaft, the distribution of these the natural exposed negative charges, again, on the hair will not be the same, obviously, as the other hair. These are all sort of randomly. Everyone's different. So that when we introduce the conditioner to that hair, you're going to see, just you'll see a different patch, right? And as a consequence, you preserve the unique reflectivity of each hair shaft. Okay, now you had a question.
I did have a question. Earlier you said, but get it, that the positive takes care of that negative.
Right.
But just that part.
Just that part.
How does it just knows that
it's positive attracts negative.
And
That's it. There's nothing special. There's really nothing special. So that's really the whole key. And the key to this whole Illume system is what we don't do. So the fact is that because we're not coating the hair with a negative charge, you can do a lot of things.
Right.
Okay, that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the whole key. You're not leaving anything. You're not depositing a strongly negatively charged substance. The Illume, the combination of surfactants and Exo 70 also gives a very, as you've seen, a pretty impressive foam.
Yeah.
Right? It's a good foam and a good cleaning. It's a different foam because it doesn't have the exactly. But it gives you a foam, and that's something we wanted. We felt that was a positive sensory experience. It also does permeate the component, one of the components in Exo 70, the superficial layers of the scalp, which really helps the water barrier, and improves the sort of natural water barrier property of your scalp, which is very important for the health of your scalp. So the reason that we're not we don't remove color is also related to this. It's fairly simple. Normally when a hair is treated for coloring, two things are done. One of them is the hair is exposed to very strong alkaline conditions, right? So you have sodium hydroxide or ammonia, right? And what it does is very, very interesting. This very high alkaline solution naturally causes
a ton of those.
lots of this.
I'm Sure.
okay? All over the place, this this occurs. If you were to take a protein and you were to now, or a population of proteins, and you would bring, this is acid, this is alkaline. As you go to the alkaline side, loads and loads of negatives. As you go to the acid side, loads and loads of positives. Right? In the center, when you have a pH that's balanced, there's really nothing. Right? So, or in the case of hair, it's slightly negative. When you make the hair very alkaline, everything becomes lots of negative. And what happens here is the hair, with all of these negative charges inside of it, begins to expand. So the hair shaft begins to balloon. And as soon as it balloons, it gets lots and lots of holes, pores. So now you can put a dye in. And the dyes that are used are chemicals that are positively charged.
Right.
All right? So they penetrate, they're positively charged, and they stick to these negatively charged, all right? And let me just move that over there. Okay, and so they're in the hair now, and they're in part attracted to these negatively charged sites on the various proteins that make up the inside of the hair. Okay. Okay. Now, the reason that and then what, of course, is then done is that in the normal coloring process, a conditioner is then used to bring the hair back to normal pH. So it's then, the conditioner has a buffering agent that reduces the alkalinity and brings it more to a balanced pH. And then the hair shrinks, literally will shrink. So if you were to look at it under a strong microscope, you'd see that this hair now shrinks, and it's got these pigment particles trapped inside. All right, they're trapped, literally trapped. So it's so-called permanent. Till you wash it, yeah. But basically, they're more or less trapped. The reason that the Illume system and Exo 70 doesn't do anything is that they're not charged. The molecule is not charged, so that it has no way of displacing this pigment granule, even a positively charged pigment, because it won't interact electrostatically. Some of the SLS anionic detergents, on the other hand, can actually displace, right? They can themselves become attracted to that pigment and displace it. So Illume, the Illume system doesn't have the property of displacing this, and again, in large part because it's a non-ionic system. There is in this whole product line a deep repair conditioner, and just so I can touch upon it here, because we do not coat the hair with anything, with any anionic detergent, it's possible for us to very gently open up this hair shaft and introduce into the hair substances that can restore and correct, and I would almost say rejuvenate, the structure of the hair. And that's the fundamental principle of the deep repair conditioner that you'll hear more about later. And what we do there is very gently alter the structure of hair and then put in some, include in this some substances that are natural to the hair itself that can now permeate, and then we let the system seal. But again, this is all possible because we have not eliminated, altered the fundamental structure of the hair. So this is really the basics. To some extent, and we've said this amongst ourselves, what makes our system what makes the Illume system special and unique is that we have respected what nature has worked so hard to create, this water barrier, this highly evolved system to keep microbes at bay, and we've done our best to preserve that system and not perturb it and work with it. And that really is the underlying feature of the system. And I should point out that from a medical perspective, what you will see in some of the clients is you will see a reduction in scalp irritation. You will see reduced breakage. You will see many of the properties of hair and scalp that we regard as health benefits. What happens frequently is that, and this happens frequently after we use a traditional soap, and I'm really trying to stress that our use of the so-called conventional soaps is probably one of the big problems of the last 30 years in dermatology and in medicine. When you wash healthy skin, okay, which has a barrier, a water and antimicrobial peptide protein barrier, you take away these substances that I've just described that keep bad guys from populating the skin. All right? So I just want you to appreciate. Normally, you may have good guys. You'll have good guys on the skin who are not capable of invading or causing disease. You wipe this away, and all of a sudden, you've got guys like this. All right? They're not supposed to be there. Okay? And the body knows it. And they go a little deeper, and then they secrete their stuff, their bacterial proteins, and the body knows it. And the body then says, uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. And then what the body does, in very interesting immunology, the body says, we better start making some more skin. We got a problem here. And it starts to increase the production of skin because it really wants to get these guys away. Mm-hmm. And then you have white blood cells and other pieces of equipment of our immune system that says, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And you start to see rashes, and you start to see blemishes, and you start to see signs of irritation and redness and things that look like something's wrong with the skin. Mm-hmm. It begins to age. It begins to look sick. It looks older, and literally this is what happens. And sometimes you'll see rashes that might resemble acne, or you'll start to see other issues that we would call that would bring attention to you or to others. So it's the removal. A lot of this results from the simple removal of that barrier.
Okay.
Right? So in this particular case, all I'm saying is that by maintaining, the point I'm making is that by maintaining the normal antimicrobial film and the normal the waterproofing properties of skin, you keep the immune system from reacting, and you keep microbes that would otherwise want to invade us from invading. And just to give you to make it clear, on your skin, on all of our skin right now, we have things like we have organisms and bacteria like MRSA. So believe it or not, there's MRSA on my skin, all of our skin surfaces. Mm-hmm. But they're not a problem.
Right.
And why aren't they a problem? I could find MRSA in every one of us now. The reason they're not a problem is because of this. So that if I were now to take a typical body wash or a shampoo, I'm now removing a key barrier, and I'm now opening my skin up for fundamentally for a potential attack, for a potential attack. So there are medical issues, there are deeper health issues that are of concern to some of us, and then there are and then there are other less serious benefits that we've talked about that arise. So I don't regard. In fact, I've come to appreciate more lately the importance of the non-trivial importance of what we put on our hair and skin. And I, frankly, even with most people I deal with, most patients, most people whose care I'm involved with, I ardently now argue that we should be avoiding the use of the traditional soaps and shampoos. Yeah.